Hello everyone, how's it going? It's me again, the guy with the computer voice who loves to mispronounce names. If you're an American Gods fan, it's a pretty exciting time right now because the first episode for Season 2 of the Starz Series American Gods just premiered. Since the last season, there was a changeover of showrunners. Brian Fuller and Michael Green departed the show, so there were some questions about whether or not this show was going to be cancelled or whether or not the quality would drop. And there were a lot of questions about what this new season would be like. And I've watched it, and just to give you my very broad thoughts on it, I loved it. It was actually one of my favorite episodes of the series so far, and it makes me very excited to see the rest of this season, and even more seasons in the future, hopefully. Of course, it wasn't perfect, but I thought the quality was right up there with anything that the first season did. So in this video, I'm going to go over the entire show and point out all the Easter eggs and things I noticed, or just little observations. There will be Easter eggs, but I'll also just pepper in my little thoughts on things as well. Just a warning, if you haven't seen the episode yet, I will be getting into spoilers during this part of the video. So let's go. After a recap of what happened last season, we go right into the show, and it starts seemingly right after the last episode of the last season and Wednesday's thunderstrike, which killed all of Mr. World's droogs because Mr. World seems to still be flickering from that event. He's still glitching. It begins with Technical Boy going to this, what looks like a country club called the Black Briar, and when he arrives there, Mr. World gets out of the back of his limo and is admitted into a bunker. And this is actually a reference to a real place called the Green Briar, not the Black Briar. And it's a luxury resort in West Virginia where apparently a total of 26 US presidents have stayed at one time or another. And during the 50s, they actually did build a bunker under this resort that was meant to be for the president and US Congress during the Cold War, just in case of an attack. It was called codename Project Greek Island, but eventually the project was abandoned and it is apparently declassified now and tourists can actually go and see it. But this is the Black Briar, so I guess we're supposed to feel like this is the true emergency bunker, and Mr. World has access to this. Mr. World is sort of revealing himself to be the man behind the man behind the man. In other words, the shadow figure of power behind all government and other types of power in the US. That's what I think he represents. And the last time I said that interpretation, I got a lot of flack from people because in the book he is revealed to be someone else. So just to make this clear, I know who he is in the book, and he may be revealed to be that in the series as well, or they may change it because they've shown in the series that they like to make fans of the novel guess about things. So I think in the series they're portraying Mr. World as being this shadow figure who in a way is responsible for every conspiracy theory you've ever heard. Mr. World is the guy behind them all. And whether the reveal is the same as the book or not, I don't think it changes that because I think that's what the character has become now. But that's just my interpretation. So Mr. World is admitted to the Black Briar bunker, and he makes a comment saying he needs to see through the eyes of Argus. Argus is a giant in Greek mythology who has many eyes, and sometimes is called the all-seeing one. So when he says he needs to see through Argus, he means that this bunker has the ability to see everything, like Argus. Just wanted to say I actually love this map effect, and I hope they do it more often. And of course, once again, you can see Odin's ravens there flying by. They seem to follow him wherever he goes. And this section of the show I really liked because it kind of has a road trip movie vibe. I love road trip movies, so I hope we get more of that in the coming episodes. And then we start to hear the story of Alex Jordan, the creator of The House on the Rock, and it's narrated by Mr. Ibis. And we get these great shots of The House on the Rock, which, by the way, I've seen pictures of The House on the Rock before, and I've seen pictures inside it, but I never saw it to the extent that I've seen it in this episode, and damn is it amazing. I really want to go now. And I bet tourism for The House on the Rock will just blow up because anybody that sees this episode is going to want to go to it in Wisconsin. Every shot in The House on the Rock is interesting because there are so many little trinkets and things and little tiny strange things that make you pause and kind of consider them. In a way, it's kind of like a metaphor for America as well. You kind of think you know America, but there are all these strange histories, and the more you look into it, the stranger it becomes. At least that's my interpretation of America. I guess you could say the same about any country. Bilquis goes to the house on the rock and she stays in the ladies' room and then comes out after it closes. And if you remember the last season, Technical Boy essentially has her in his pocket, so he's getting her to be the woman on the inside during this meeting and work for the new gods. Then we meet Mama G, who at this point is not doing great. She's working as a maid and I guess a waitress also at this Motel America. And there are a few little funny Easter eggs in this scene. First of all, a spider goes across the TV screen, and the colors of the spider are actually the colors of Mr. Nancy's suit that you see him wearing later. So I guess this is telling us that it's Mr. Nancy, and he's appearing there to tell her about the meeting. Another little cute Easter egg is that when she places down these objects on the bed, she actually has 3 hands. If you notice, there are 3 hands placing 3 objects down, which is reference to the many arms of Kali. And then the last strange Easter egg, literally Easter egg, is that the reporter in the news is wearing a bunny costume. So I don't know if we're meant to think if he's the Easter bunny. It seems just like a cheap costume, but it's a funny little detail regardless. Shado is trying to open the gate in this scene, and then we see a little spider crawling over the gate, and all of a sudden Mr. Nancy appears, because he's a spider. So Mr. Nancy mentions that John Henry only comes by choo-choo train, which is interesting, meaning that John Henry, the American folk hero, does exist in this world, but apparently he only goes somewhere by train. And then there's a little reference to Whiskey Jack, who is actually the Native American culture hero, Wisaki Jack. And Mr. Nancy mentions that Easter is not coming because Wednesday drove over some bunnies, which we saw in that final episode. In reality, the actress who plays Easter, Kristen Chenoweth, left the series when Brian Fuller and Michael Green left the series. So this is how they wrote her out of the series, I guess. The interactions between Laura and Wednesday are interesting because from the last season, Laura knows that Wednesday was the one that called out the hit on her. Matt Sweeney told her, but she isn't letting him know. She's holding her cards to her chest. She hasn't really revealed that she knows that yet. And also in this scene, Mr. Wednesday quickly mentions the story of how he, Odin, discovered the runes by piercing his own body and hanging on the tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights. That will come into play in the series later. Salim and the Jinn are reunited at the house on the rock, and the Jinn doesn't seem happy about it because he doesn't see a future in their relationship, but Salim seems determined to make things work between them. There's a funny moment where Odin thinks Salim might be Hubal or Manat. Hubal is a pre-Islamic Arabic god who is thought to help in divination, and Manat is also a pre-Islamic Semitic goddess, so it's a bit strange that Wednesday thought that's who Salim was. The fortune sequence is also interesting, and I'm not sure if all the fortunes will come into play, but the one that we actually see, Shado's fortune, is a little bit of foreshadowing as to what will happen to his character, at least as it is in the book. This shot lingers on these statues a little bit, and I think it might be a reference to the Kobold, which is like a German elf, or usually German house elf, that is referenced in the book, so that might be why it's lingering a little bit too long on that shot. And again, this shot in the house on the rock with Zoria Vechernia looks amazing. Every one of these shots makes me want to go to the house on the rock. So during this scene, Shado stands under a sign that says Chalet of the Raven, House of the Raven, which might be a reference to Odin's ravens. This interaction with Shado and Bilquis and Mr. Nancy is interesting because they definitely know more about his purpose than he does. And this speech by Wednesday is interesting because it explains why they're at the house on the rock. There are these places of power or points of power, and people will build things around them. So this is a place of power, and the house was simply built around it, which kind of makes me want to visit every roadside attraction in America. The carousel sequence was great. My only critique is that I just wish it had been longer because it's such an important part of the novel. I just wish it had lingered on it a little bit longer, but that's okay. And then this weird warping scene is really funny. The way Wednesday looks reminds me of the animator Syriac, if you know who I'm talking about, this weird, demented animator. Then they travel to backstage, which is like an alternate plane that the gods can travel to or travel through, and plays an important part in the book. And Bilquis explains that they're actually in Wednesday's mind. But this shot with the light on Shado's forehead makes me think she's lying and they're actually in Shado's mind, not Wednesday's mind. But that's just my guess. And then we get this great sequence in Odins Hall, and we see a bunch of gods I thought they would at least name them in this sequence, but they don't name them. They leave most of them mysterious, which is intriguing but also frustrating. I suspect that later in the series some of these gods will be revealed, because I went on IMDb and some of the actors playing these gods are quite good actors, and it seems like it would be a waste to just use them in this scene and then we don't see them again, so they'll probably pop back up later. But some information was released on IMDb, so that gives me more of a clue as to who some of these gods are. The Japanese goddess that we see here, who I previously thought was Izanami, who is a goddess of the Shinto religion, but on the IMDb page they reveal that this is Ame no Uzumi, who is another Shinto goddess associated with the dawn, and in the mythology she's most known for persuading Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, to come back from her heavenly rock cave when she goes hiding there. Ame no Uzumi draws her out with the dance. And the character is played by the actress Uni Park. So I hope we see more of her in the coming episodes, but we'll have to see. Also, Uzumi has these Japanese characters tattooed on the back of her neck, and I can't actually read Japanese, but I had my friend who can read it, and he thinks that it says something like "Believe in me." Also, according to IMDb, an actor named Al Maini is playing the Persian god Ahura Mazda, and I think it's this god here because I saw a picture of the actor and he has a very unique face, as you can see, so I think that's him. Ahura Mazda is the god of the Zoroastrianist religion, which was a religion that existed during the empire of Cyrus the Great in Persia, based on the teachings of Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustra, but I'm sure I'm getting the pronunciation wrong. In any case, it's a monotheistic religion, and Ahura Mazda is the sole god, but it's also a dualistic religion, so this character, if we see him again, could possibly have two sides to his personality. This goddess, I'm pretty sure, is the actress Sonia Kote, and in the IMDb page, she's only described as beautiful woman god, which doesn't give us a whole lot to go on. It could be any number of goddesses associated with beauty or love. It could be someone like Venus, the Roman goddess, or Aphrodite, the Greek counterpart, or even a Celtic goddess like Branwen. There are a bunch of goddesses that are associated with beauty, and there's really not a whole lot to go on, but I think we'll see her in later episodes, so it'll be revealed. This woman, I think, is Yvette McCoy, and in this scene she's described on IMDb as simply warrior woman god. Based on the way she looks, it's possible she's another African goddess, so just to throw a guess out there, it could possibly be Oya, who is the warrior queen of the Orishas in African mythology, but that's just a guess. And also in the scene, according to the IMDb page, there are other actors playing other gods, like John Stoneham Sr., who is simply called Old Wizard God, or Michael Schur, who is called Thuggish Man God. So I could try to decipher who they are, but because they're not featured prominently, I'll just skip by them for now, and hopefully we'll see them in future episodes. I don't want to throw out too many names because in my previous breakdowns of the trailers, whenever I didn't have anything to go on, I would just throw out names of gods, like a monkey throwing its own feces at a wall. I don't want to do that too hard in this breakdown. It's interesting in this scene that Zorya Verchernaya is actually all the Zoryas. You can see all three Zoryas' faces in her face. And then of course we see Kali in her god form, and there are some interesting little shadows and reflections. In one scene, you can just barely see one of her many arms holding a skull, and then as she walks by Shado, you can see another one of her arms holding a sword. And generally speaking, I thought the effects of this scene were phenomenal. I mean, for a show that doesn't have a massive budget, the effects here are just really beautiful and kind of mysterious, and whoever did them did a great job. I liked the way that Mr. Nancy looked as Anansi, the spider spirit, and I also liked his speech, but I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't do the Tiger's Ball speech that he does during this scene in the book, because it's hilarious. Shado talks to the gods and kind of serves his purpose by helping with Wednesday's pitch. Again, my only critique of this scene is that I wish the sequence was longer, because I was having so much fun in this space with all these different gods trying to decipher which ones they were. And then in the diner afterwards, we get an interesting interaction between Bilquis and Laura. Bilquis realizes that Laura and Shado are a pair, and she seems to be trying to seduce both of them. And then of course Mr. World calls in a strike. We get this quick little shot of the bullet, which says Deus Mortuorum, which means God is dead. I mispronounced that in one of my previous breakdowns, so I had to get it right this time. And then in this scene, Shado gets abducted by a UFO, which again I think plays into this whole conspiracy thing that Mr. World seems to represent. It's like every conspiracy you've ever heard of is controlled by Mr. World, or at least that's how I interpret it. And then there's a very sad ending. Zorya Vechernia is shot and dies. Wednesday seems genuinely sad here, but then right after he makes his speech, you can kind of see a little bit of a knowing look on his face, like he knew this was going to happen. And then right in the final shot, we see Laura watching the UFO flying away, and she can see that Shado is inside it. So in the next episode, I'm sure she'll go after him and try to rescue him. But that's the end of the episode. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Did you enjoy it? Do you think the quality has dropped somewhat since the last season, or has it increased? And also, were there Easter eggs you noticed that I didn't notice, or did I get one of these Easter eggs wrong? Please let me know in the comments below. Like I said before, I really enjoyed this episode. It makes me very hopeful for this season. And if this video does well, then I'll break down every episode. I love trying to speculate who these gods are. It's a fun pastime for me, so I can't wait to do that in the future episodes. If you like this video, please like the vid and subscribe to the channel, or check out these other videos. And if you want to support the channel and help me make more videos more often, please donate to the channel Patreon listed in the description below. Until the next episode of American Gods.